sick and dysfunctional value systems. Many people disturbed by black behavior but reluctant to sound judgmental describe black values as a pathology produced by oppression and the ghetto. Just as pneumonia is bad yet non-culpable, nobody's fault, pathological norms can be described as bad yet not blameworthy, and perhaps as distortion of something more agreeable. For their part, critics of the medical analogy see it as a veneer for moralism. Sickness is somatic, they say, so behavior cannot be sick. Criticism of behavior should be stated frankly without pretense of scientific neutrality. Both views are partly right. Behaviors and value systems, as well as organic structures, can be unhealthy, contrary to critics of the medical analogy. At the same time, the radically divergent, conflicting value systems of groups that have evolved apart may all be healthy, and behavior that is pathological when exhibited by members of one group may be healthy when exhibited by members of another. Black deviation from white norms does not by itself imply anything wrong with black norms or behavior. The key issue is the meaning of health. Calling a condition unhealthy makes no reference to any particular cause, since people recognized sicknesses before knowing what caused them. Nor is sickness a name for conditions people dislike, since ugly people are not considered ill. Also, health covers more than just the absence of disease, since a broken leg, although undiseased, requires medical attention. We call such conditions abnormalities, and, in fact, abnormality includes disease as a special case, diseased structures being an abnormal condition, but not, as the broken leg case shows, vice versa. The fundamental opposition is that between normality and abnormality. The normality of a behavior depends on its evolutionary history. The same behavior can be normal for one organism and abnormal for another. Hunger for hay is normal for horses, but not for lions, since eating hay was adaptive for horses, but not for lions. The word normal is evaluatively neutral. That behavior was adaptive in ancestral environments does not automatically make it good or right. Still, it carries positive connotations, primarily because of the positive correlates of normality. Suppose the conflicting values of hunters and gatherers evolved in very different environments. A degree of helpfulness considered obligatory by hunters is considered foolish by gatherers, whereas hunters might regard gatherers as selfish. Each may think that something is wrong with and dislike the other. Yet, as these incompatible norms were each adaptive in the hunter and gatherer ancestral environments, there is nothing wrong with either. Hunters and gatherers who conform to their own respective values each act normally. In fact, a reinforcement tendency normal in one group may be abnormal in another. There may be nothing wrong with a gatherer disinclined to help others, but a good deal wrong with an equally indifferent hunter. Symptomatically, hunters might experience guilt at failing to cooperate, while equally uncooperative gatherers are emotionally placid. You see where he's going with this? Here is a model that allows black values to be normal. The separate evolution of blacks and whites, which appears to have produced cognitive and temperamental differences, makes it possible, indeed likely, that behaviors and norms pathological for whites are not pathological for blacks, and that identical behaviors and norms have different functional significance for the two races. It must be shown, rather than assumed, that behavior that is abnormal when displayed by whites is also abnormal when displayed by blacks. Fighting and stealing often symptomatize personality disorders in white youths, for instance, so it is tempting to conclude that black youths, who fight and steal more frequently, are more disturbed. Should such behavior occasion weaker feelings of guilt among blacks than among whites, however, it may simply be that levels of aggression normal for blacks are higher than those normal for whites, and normal levels of concern for others lower. There is certainly evidence that, for blacks, violent behavior is accompanied by fewer negative feelings. The emotions of black teenage murderers have been described this way. Quote, "Their initial reaction after the shootings was not sorrow or remorse, but survival. How do I get out of this?" End quote. Treaster, 1992. This represents a minority of young black male murderers, to be sure, but there is no comparable white subpopulation. A survey by USA Today found that 35% of the looters arrested after the Los Angeles riots reported participating in the looting, quote, "because it was fun," end quote. Among many blacks, shoplifting is an accepted method of procuring stylish clothing, and jail is a rite of passage. Nothing here indicates guilt or distress. Commentators should bear in mind the possibility that the readiness for violence displayed by American blacks was adaptive in ancestral environments, or, more precisely, that the genotype expressed as violence in contemporary white society might once have been expressed as some, possibly distinct, adaptive phenotype. In that event, black violence would neither need nor be amenable to cure. So the problem might not be that we haven't found the cure or we haven't applied the cure. The problem might be that there is no cure. So let's stop trying to cure it. The problem might be that they're in the wrong environment, and that wrong environment being proximity to white people. Existence in a white society might be causing their behavior. So if that's the case, I guess you could say there is a cure, but the cure would involve removing them from the toxic environment, so to speak. Likewise, such other stereotypical black pathologies as drug use, reliance on public assistance, illegitimacy, and lack of ambition, whatever they signify when displayed by whites, may express a genotype fit in ancestral environments. If Caucasoids and Mongoloids evolved longer time horizons because of the demands of survival in Eurasia, the level of concern for the future implied by unwillingness to work at boring, poorly paid jobs, while abnormally low for Caucasoids and Mongoloids, is normal for blacks. Indeed, identical activities will be perceived as differentially boring and not worth the effort. Assuming that more rapid sexual maturation, greater expenditure of energy in mating than parenting, more intense male competition for females, and lower levels of male engagement in child-rearing were differentially adaptive in black ancestral environments, present black levels of illegitimacy and abandonment are also normal. One would always expect the fittest child-rearing practices to be selected for in any population. The most adaptive treatment of lion cubs is that administered by lionesses, rough as it is by human standards. The low academic achievement of black children adopted by whites, see Chapter 4, suggests that black parenting patterns, although negligent and harsh by white standards, are also a biological adaptation. You know, husky dogs probably can't really understand why chihuahuas are shivering when it's cold, and vice versa. The chihuahuas are probably like, that's strange. Why isn't the husky shivering? It's so cold. They're completely different subspecies. They're going to behave differently because they adapted to different environments. Think again of the spike in black illegitimacy and crime over the last 50 years, probably facilitated by such environmental factors as the lower costs of illegitimacy and crime. We're making it too easy for them. We're trying to help, but we're actually hurting. I have conjectured that this change, together with white failure to respond similarly to these same factors, illustrates the gene-environment interaction stressed by Jenks and Lewontin. The black genotypes controlling violence and sexual behavior express themselves very differently in the pre- and post-1965 environments, with black and white genotypes diverging more in the post-1965 environment. On the present analysis of normal, there would then be nothing abnormal about black levels of illegitimacy and crime before or after 1960. Both behaviors in both eras express the same once adaptive genotypes. Most people deplore crime and illegitimacy, but using the term sick for dispreferred behavior without evidence of deviation from a past functional role really is disapproval under a patronizing medical cover. Ginther cautions that high MMPI scores, MMPI is Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, psychological test that measures personality traits and psychopathology. High MMPI scores predicting maladjustment among whites may not predict maladjustments among blacks, especially within the black community. Quote, one cannot assume that a profile or code type has the same behavioral reference for blacks and whites. The attribution of maladjustment to blacks' MMPIs on the basis of white norms appears unwarranted and highly undesirable. End quote. Ginther is right that non-white scores on diagnostic instruments may indicate good adjustment for blacks among other blacks, but it does not follow that black scores mean nothing. They do reliably register race differences in temperament and behavioral propensities. For both blacks and whites, higher psychoticism scores indicate a propensity to behavior that violates white norms. The point is that a propensity to violate white norms need not be disordered or dysfunctional for all groups. It's only dysfunctional contextually within the context of white society. Maybe their behavior or their propensities would be adaptive or helpful in Africa, essentially, is what he's saying. The word antisocial is another group relative term. Behavior works against a society when it frays social bonds, so pro- and antisociality may vary among societies held together by different bonds. The relations uniting Group X may be impervious to or strengthened by behavior that weakens the relations uniting Group Y, in which case anti-Y behavior will be neutral or pro-X. To the extent that white and black social groups are maintained by different relations, black behavior that is anti-white society may be pro-black society. One instance might be the swaggering black walk noted by many commentators. The male gang appears to be an important element of black society, making aggressive physical display, which helps determine rank in loose male hierarchies, black pro-social. The same oppositional or defiant body language is disruptive of white society, in whose crowded cities constant physical challenge is intolerable, and where hierarchical status is determined by more symbolic displays of dominance aggression. Calling black crime, drug use, illegitimacy, and academic failure pathologies may just be a way of saying that these behaviors are maladaptive in the contemporary American environment. However, behavior is literally maladaptive only if it retards reproductive success, and the total reproductive rate of 2.2 for American blacks exceeds the population replacement rate of 2.1. In fact, despite a lower life expectancy and higher infant mortality, black fertility is greater than white. Unfortunately. Thanks to white people, by the way. Brody, 1992, following Vining's somewhat different analysis, puts the white fertility rate at 1.46 and the black at 1.94. Hacker estimates that black women have 1.3 babies for every baby born to a white woman. The world is getting dumber. The United States is getting dumber. The fertility rate for the United States population as a whole is 1.8. This is from Wattenberg, 1987. So these figures are kind of not current. Remember, this book is from 1997. Moreover, it is hard to see how black fertility could be higher if illegitimacy, drug use, and crime were lower. 33% of all black children and their mothers are now supported almost entirely by the resources of genetically unrelated whites in the form of public assistance, rather than by their biological parents. Do you understand what that means? Do you know what the word cuck means? Whites, as a race, are being cucked. We are being forced to raise or to support other people's children. Both, really. We're paying for them financially for their subsistence, and we're also raising them, you could say, in a manner of speaking, if they're attending white schools. So, what do you think, white man? Are you ready to stop being cucked? I am. Black success at inducing whites to divert resources from their own children to the children of unrelated blacks is successful exploitation of the environment rarely matched in nature. Black behavioral norms might eventually become maladaptive. On the standard theory, populations utilizing the R reproductive strategy are subject to collapse when environments turn unfavorable, for instance by the exhaustion of resources. Specific scenarios are hard to project, but one might speculate about what might happen should the tax base for welfare erode at the same time that white and Asian food retailers withdrew from black neighborhoods. Nonetheless, at the moment, black norms are highly adaptive. So, what would happen if we stopped giving them free stuff? What would happen if we stopped rewarding illegitimacy, laziness, stupidity, promiscuity? I think there would be a good result. And I won't say any more.